Okay, collectors, art people, art lovers. In this video, we will cover the basics of collecting art, and give you some real tips that you can use in order to make better investments in the art and grow as a collector and just simply enrich your life with, from a spiritual point of view, a visual point of view, and a financial point of view. So let's dive into the video. My name is Dries Ketels. Let's go. So the first advice that I would give you is an advice that you often hear, but the problem with it is that most of the times it's given incomplete. The advice is incomplete. Most of the times people, gallerists or dealers or artists or whatever, will recommend you to, in the beginning, only work with respected dealers who have a track record, respected galleries who have a track record, etc., etc., etc. Established galleries. And I completely agree with that. It's way more risky to buy directly from the artist, especially when it's upcoming art, etc., etc. But here's the thing. Not all galleries are created equal. Also in the established realm, they're not all created equal, and they're basically, for the sake of this video, two types of galleries. And sometimes a gallery is type A, and then 5 years later it becomes type B, or the other way around, and there's kind of one type that you desperately need as a beginner collector. The first type will help you out. You come in the gallery, for example, or in a show or an opening or whatever. They will help you out. They will listen with you. They will talk with you. They will be really friendly and having their smile on and all of that stuff. And it's clear that they read some sales books or whatever. And at some point they will try to close and make that sale. And that's all good. And perhaps they don't do it there, but the day after or whatever, or whatever their tactics are. That's type A. And that's fine. Those galleries, some of them are really good galleries. Now type B galleries, you will come in and they will immediately understand what you are, a beginning art collector. They will smell it. They will feel it. And therefore they will also know what you actually need. As a beginning art collector, you have so much questions. What you actually desire is not to spend a lot of money on art, but it's to understand and grow. And so they will feel that you are in need of education. And those galleries you will have to pick. And they might not always be the best galleries, but the galleries and dealers and people that actually educate you, actually understand that that is what you need most at that time, those are the galleries that you need to pick. Now, don't expect galleries to educate you for weeks on end without you buying art. That's just not gonna happen. Nobody's gonna educate you for months for free to then, that's not gonna happen. But definitely scan for those art, because it's the education that will really lift you up. It's the connections that you will get out of you have to go for education and connections in the beginning. No doubt about that. Number two, advice number two. You inevitably will, even though that might not be my best advice, but inevitably most collectors try to invest in upcoming art in the beginning. They do. And that's normal. That's good. That's good. Even though it might be safer not to do that, it's just really exciting and it's really stimulating. The amount of returns you can get in that upcoming realm is insane. You might buy a painting for 400 that 10 years later or less than a decade later is worth 400,000 euro or 800,000 euro or perhaps even more. That's a return of tens of thousands of percentages in less than a decade. That's insane. And so inevitably you will feel the desire to do that perhaps before you are able to do that. That happens often, and so that's why here's my second advice. If you want to do that, which might not be my actual advice, but if you want to do that, at some point you probably will, then the worst thing you can do is pretend to be a professional collector. who's gonna scan everything. Track records of artists. They are gonna scan the painting, like all of the particular aspects, composition. They will link it back to art history. They will compare it with the hypes and trends of the market at that moment. They will do all these things. You will not be able to do that in your first 6 months or whatever. Like, being able to scan the art, the craftsmanship of the art, takes a lot of knowledge. You will have to you need an understanding of art history. You need an understanding of craftsmanship in general. The trends, like that, there's so much that you need to understand in order to be able to scan that. You need to understand stuff about conservation, perhaps some scientific stuff here, like, and there. It's too much. It's too much. And so trying to do that often leads to the wrong decision. What you should be doing instead is something that you are already able to do perfectly. Something that you've been training for unconsciously throughout your whole life. We naturally talk with people and interact with people on a daily basis. And so we naturally and consciously train ourselves to scan those people on a daily basis. And so we are pretty good at that. And so the tactic that I would give you, if you go for something like that, if you really want to take that risk, because it's high risk, upcoming artist, high risk. If you want to take that risk just to try it out, which is natural, it's a good, healthy thing to do, then I would go for the angel investor approach, where you understand that art, amazing art, most of the times will be worthless as fuck. Where you understand that the best idea possible, the artist that comes up with this amazing idea, this like that artwork that you might feel that connection with, will be, from a financial point of view, most of the time worthless in the end. And so taking that angel investor point of view means that you, instead of scanning for ideas and quality and all of that stuff, you will scan for the person behind the art. You will scan for somebody who is an executor. Somebody who comes over as an expert but is an executor at heart. Somebody that works in the trenches. Somebody that's persistent and stubborn to some extent. Somebody that you will have to scan for habits. Which habits do they have, these artists? How do they focus? How do they train their focus? How do they how much skin in the game do they have? Like, do they go on a regular basis to events to get those connections coming in, etc., and building that people portfolio out? You will have to scan for the person behind it, because the truth is that, just like in the world of business, where you have people who have an amazing idea, and then completely fail because of their execution. Like, let's say, for example, Uber. The idea of Uber already existed 10 years beforehand by a company with some people who couldn't execute and couldn't do the thing, and they dramatically failed. And then Uber came along. They did the same idea, executed it properly, and won big time. And so the arts, that's the same thing. If you look at the magazines 50 years ago, a lot of the artists there that were featured and that were the big thing at that moment are now worthless. Why? Not because of the art. Because of the person behind the art. And so you have to scan for that person. The art is a necessity, but the reality is that it is completely unimportant. That's the simple reality. And so you will have to scan for the person behind it. And so ask the right questions. Like asking the right questions is so crucial. When I was exhibiting in London with Saatchi Art during an art fair, I saw, probably in that weekend, I think that's 2-3 years ago, in that weekend I saw 140, 150 collectors coming by, who all talked for 5 to 10 minutes with me. I can promise you that most of them don't know what to ask. Most of them don't know what to ask. They have no clue. And you can sometimes see that they got something from a blog on the internet or something, like some standard question, but you can kind of feel that they don't really understand why that question is so important. Most of them don't ask for most of them don't try to figure out what the person is behind the art. They don't. They just look at the art, they ask questions about the art, they try to find out if you're an expert and if you're really good at what you do. Most of the times, the people who are standing there are really good at what they do, and most of them will fail. And so you really have to see yourself as some kind of angel investor that tries to figure out the execution potential rather than the quality potential or the ID potential. And for the last tip, by the way, if you want to dive in deep into which questions you should be asking as a collector, which questions you should be asking when you're going to an art fair and you might consider buying emerging art to get those returns, then you definitely have to go to one of my other videos that covers exactly that and that speaks about which questions are the most important questions to ask artists, upcoming artists, to scan for their quality. I will link that at the end of this video as well. But for the last tip, this is probably the most stupid way to waste your money. And a lot of collectors do, because at the moment it seems so logical and it seems so good to do that, but most of the times it's not. The third mistake, or the third advice that I can give you, is never go for the hypes. Never go for the hypes. When there's a hype going on, galleries and dealers who want to sell art of that particular artist to you, they will show you the stats. Look, yeah, that also happened 5 years ago, and this is what happened with this artist, and this is what happened, like, now the same thing is happening, it's all in a boom market, blah, 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 all of that stuff. Like, it will look really, really good, like an amazing investment that you could make. But don't go there. Because most of those hypes, a lot, they go completely under afterwards. And so it's just like in the stock market. You don't want to buy on an all-time high. You don't. Because if you buy on an all-time high, statistically the chances are way more likely that you will sell lower. And so don't try to completely avoid the hypes, especially in the beginning, and just don't do that. That will be my last advice for this video. If you want to have more advice about the business side of the arts, make sure you subscribe, of course. And yeah, I hope to see you next time. Ciao. Ciao.